And I'm going to share with you with some new and exciting badge that was sent to me by Global Azure, so that you can actually claim it and you can have it under your belt. So without any, extra word here, I'm switching to the next slide. And I'll give everybody, oops, let me go back. Okay. Let me make sure why it's not showing. I'm going. Okay, everybody. I'm going to show now the slide, which is the. Okay, does everybody see this slide? So basically, this is the slide called Swag and More, where you should be able to see the. In order to save some bandwidth, I'm going to disable my video. So do you see this Swag and More? So you can actually claim your learner badge. And because everybody joined, and maybe there are some people who are going to join a bit late, I'm going to display this slide for the next 30 seconds. So please, use your phone, or you can also use the URL for that. But it is definitely works better with your phone, so that you can actually get your learner badge. Okay, looks like Philip got it. Congratulations. So Ramona also got it. Cool. What about other guys? Victor, and let me know, Hackle and others. Please feel free to get this badge from Global Azure, and thank you for joining to this session. I'll give next 10 seconds, and we would have to switch to the slides, to the demonstration, okay? Okay, let me know once everybody got the badge. Okay, 5 more seconds, and we are switching the slides here.
Oh yes, what like you did. I just like when I scan the QR code, it doesn't do anything. It just says like page not found.
Okay. I will try to give you another slide at the end of presentation, but it should be able to show you, how to claim this, swag, basically. That was expected. All right, let's move, guys. Move forward with our session today. So, welcome again. My name is Elhan, and information about myself is written on the site. I also run the blog called thecloudmarathoner.com. And everyone, please, you can please feel free to introduce yourself. And just to start, if you want, you can actually send me the information in a way that you can put your name, which I can see actually, but you can say, you can put your name, company where you are working for, or position, and position that you are working on. So if you can share this information, I'll be more than glad to contact you back and see, what type of challenge you are facing, and I would be happy to learn about them and probably help you in the way. Okay, I see Ramona is the software CDET, right? CDET, software development tester, software development engineer tester software. We have Philip, and he is actually my colleague who works in Terex Solutions with me. Okay, anyone else? Victor, I know you, but if you want, you can share your details in the chat. Karupia.
I'll just try to in chat. I mean, okay, I see. I
Yes,
was
you
just
can
trying
type
to
it.
change my kind of like name card somehow, and I couldn't find how you like the way to do it. So
That's fine. You can share that anytime. I'm
sure.
going to move forward. It's just from my end to make sure that everybody is get to know each other. This is the community where we want to help each other and know about each other. That's all. Okay, that's it. I'm moving forward to the next slide, where I will talk a little about the company where I'm working. And as you may see, I'm working for the T-Rex Solutions. It's a mid-sized company, and it's a very good place to grow your career and do interesting work. And what we are mainly doing as a company, we are specialized in serving our government and federal civilian agencies, with US Census Bureau being the largest customer. By the way, T-Rex team did an excellent job in executing the US Census 2020 and with our partners, and I hope you had a pleasant experience while filling your census information online in 2020. Okay, it happened in US, so the people who are in US, they are familiar with that. And in addition to that, T-Rex has been listed as number one provider of cloud services to the federal government for the last 4 years. And T-Rex has a strong partnership with cloud solution providers with focus on delivering the multi-cloud mission critical solution to our customers. And by the way, you can check our open positions on our website, T-Rex Solutions, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or you want to join our team. You are more than welcome. All right. And in addition to that, let me mention that this US Census project that we run, it actually had zero downtime, 0 millisecond downtime, due to all the planning and careful approach that the T-Rex team did in advance, and which was highly rated. And we are looking forward to deliver even more mission critical services to to our government agencies. All right. Okay, that said, I want to move forward with that. All right. And thank you, Phil, for sharing the position information there. Okay. All right. All right. Next is what we will cover, right? Let's come to the main part of it. Uh, we will start actually with what is the bicep, right? It's very possible that you never heard about that. So we'll start covering that. What is this? What is Azure Bicep? Then we'll look into why we need to use this Bicep language, what value it will bring to our day-to-day job if we are dealing with Azure Cloud. Then we'll look into how to run the Bicep language in the environment and which environments it actually supports. And after that, we'll switch and look into Bicep language concepts. And we'll have a number of demos, which will conclude the session with Q&A at the end. All right. So that said, it's also very interesting to know what we are not going to cover. Okay. And we'll not cover following things due to the, time constraints. So these topics that I'm not going to cover, I'm not going to deep dive into ARM templates, even though I will show you the, overall structure and what type of concepts to expect on ARM template. We are not going to dive into CI/CD and pipelines. We are going to skip the third-party support, and we are not going to talk about integration topics. Okay, that's it. Okay, so what is a bicep, right? Let's look at that. So first of all, when we speak about bicep, it's the full name is Azure Bicep, and it's a new declarative domain-specific language, which stands for DSL, as you may see here. It's a domain-specific language for provisioning Azure resources. The purpose of Azure Bicep is to simplify the authoring experience with a cleaner syntax and more code reuse. This new language aims to make it easier to write infrastructure as a code for developers and DevOps engineers that typically create ARM templates targeting the Azure Resource Manager, so-called ARM, and writing the syntaxes more manageable than a JSON syntax of an Azure ARM template. All right. So you so next is, once we know what it is, I think the very important question that everybody needs to know is why to use Bicep language, right? And one of the and why we need to switch and why we need to spend our time to learn the Azure Bicep. Okay, so for everyone, if you are not speaking, can you mute your mics, please? That would help. Yep, thank you. All right, so I will give you now 10 reasons to start learning Azure Bicep, and I hope that you will be convinced to use Azure Bicep after this demo. Okay, that's the whole idea here. So first reason why you need to invest some time and learn is because it's easy to understand and maintain. And what I mean by that is look at this, you know, picture on the right. On the left side, what you see is actually the Azure Bicep language that defines a Cosmos DB account provisioning. You see on top here, let me make it bigger. Here on top, what we see is the parameters that are defined. Then we define the database account for Cosmos DB. And then it's actually the resource, the actual resource, Cosmos DB resource that get provisioned by using 34 lines, right? As you see here. But on the right side, what you see is actually this on the right side. What you see is the schema of a ARM JSON template, which actually uh, you would need to have in place in order to provision the same thing using the ARM JSON template. Yes, it may look like a Docker Compose, yeah, right. But the whole idea is to make it look more like a programming language in a way that it's a DSL, it's a declarative, and it's easy to understand and read and maintain. That's the whole, the main one of the main purposes. Second important reason to know to learn the Bicep that it has a day zero support, meaning that whichever new resources are getting deployed into Azure, you are going to be able to provision those resources using the Bicep language from day zero, meaning that there's guaranteed support right from the beginning. Next important reason is transparent abstraction. And you will see more examples of that once I switch to the next slide. Then it has an awesome tooling. Oh, I made a mistake here, typo, just saw it. So it has an awesome tooling in VS Code and has a special extension called Bicep Extension that I will show you. In addition to that, it has a clean code syntax. It has you can actually reuse your code, which is very important, which is possible by modular uh, declarations that you may have. It has deep integration with Azure, and it has a pre-flight validation, meaning that before provisioning resources, I'm going to show you how you can validate your script and make sure that once you start the provisioning, it's actually going to succeed without failing in the middle, okay, which is very important factor here. It has no state to manage. If you familiar with Terraforms, for example, in Terraform, you need to have the state file. But in Azure Bicep, you don't need that because all this state check and pre-flight validation are actually done in real time against the Azure environment where you have logged in, okay, where you have access. And finally, production support. Starting from the version 0.3, Azure Bicep has a production support. And if there is anything that doesn't work, you can actually open an official ticket with Microsoft, and Microsoft Azure team is going to resolve that for you. All right, taking into account that you have a production support plan with them. All right, these are the 10 reasons that I find very compelling. Next is, if you remember, I said that Bicep language is an abstraction. It's an abstraction over ARM JSON, which is Azure Resource Manager. So what it means that Azure Bicep works as an abstraction layer built over the ARM and ARM templates. All resource types, API versions, and properties valid in an ARM template are equally valid in Azure Bicep. That's why they have this day zero support. And another fact is we can do anything with Azure ARM templates, and with anything that you can do with Azure ARM templates, you can also do with Azure Bicep, as it provides a transparent abstraction over ARM. And ARM here stands for ARM. This is Azure Resource Manager. This is the basically API layer that gets all the requests before sending them to the Azure and doing the resource management or provisioning. All right. Okay, that's it. Next, let's look into how you can start using Bicep. Okay, or where you can actually use the Bicep language on what environments. And the good news is that you can actually install and run Azure Bicep in any mainframe, uh, in any main operating systems, including Linux, Mac OS, and of course the Windows operating systems. The only thing that you need to keep in mind is that if you want to use Azure CLI, you need to make sure that the version is greater than 2.20. And if you are going to use that with Azure PowerShell, you need to make sure that version is 5.6 or later one. Okay, and if you want to get actually the URL and get started tonight or today with this provisioning and making sure you can run that on your environment, I'm actually in the chat. I will provide the link so that you can actually check it up there. Okay. Next, what next in our what we are going to look is Bicep language concepts because we are going to use them. And mainly speaking, there are 6 main language concepts that Bicep has in place. And first one, of course, is the parameters, right? If you write uh, any code that you wanna reuse, it needs to have parameters, right? So it supports parameterization and it has a robust parameterization that I will show, where you can define certain constraints. In addition to that, it has variables, and variables is an important part of any language concept. For reusability, we have modules, and I will show you how to work with modules and how we are going to invoke them. Then we'll look, it has loops. So imagine that situation that you have to provision not just one or two resources into your Azure subscription or your Azure environment, but you have to but you have a task to provision 15 or 20 resources. So there is a good concept of looping that you can introduce, and actually, without changing your code, without making a messy copy paste here and there, you can actually utilize that. All right, you can utilize looping. Okay, we have new arrival to the team. And the next concept that you want to be actually familiar with is the scopes, because depending on where you are deploying your Azure resources, you can deploy them into different scopes. The smallest scope is the resource group, but you can have subscriptions, management groups, and those type of, there are 4 scopes that are available, and you will see them during the demo. And conditionals, if you want to before doing any provisioning, if there is certain state or if there is a certain condition that you want to be met, then you can use conditionals in your Bicep language. All right. So that said, let's look at those concepts, those Bicep language concepts from the shortcuts that I took later today, later yesterday. So here, what we can see, the first one is parameter, right? So what is parameter? Parameter is something that you are going to use within your provisioning, and the way how it is defined in Bicep is the how it is defined is as you may see, for example, storage name, right? And I want to stop here for a second and say why it is defined this way. If you remember, and if you have ever provisioned a storage account in Azure, you know that it has limitations, right? There's certain restrictions, and those restrictions are that it should be minimum 3 character, long, and maximum 24. All the characters should be, small letters, and plus it allows only small letters and numbers, right? So from that perspective, it makes sense to make sure that when you define parameters in your provisioning templates, you always define those limitations so that there is no issue of some other engineer come and use the same template and put their storage account name which is shorter or longer than given constraints. Okay, in addition to that, as you may see, another way how you can define parameters here is you can have predefined predefined names, right? So you can say that, okay, if your organization, let's say, you are using this provisioning for dev test purposes, and you want to make sure that the storage account that's going to be provisioned, it's actually going to be the lower SKU, so that you know so that you don't spend extra on something that you don't need, or the environment where you are provisioning doesn't need uh, geo-replicated storage SKUs. Then you can actually constrain your provisioning script and put this, allowed values from where the storage SKU is going to be picked up. All right, I hope that helps. So another concept in Azure Bicep is template functions and variables. So what they are is basically the first one is actually the parameter where we are using the template function. And the template function in this scenario is the resource group. And if any of you is familiar with ARM templates, you know that this resource group functions actually exist in ARM templates. And you can actually, in a given scope, we can take the location information from this function, from resource group. Another example is where we use the string interpolation, where we basically concatenate certain pieces of existing information in order to build up a unique storage name. That's what it does. Okay. And finally, modules. If you look at the modules, so what is module here is basically it defined by this reserved word called module. And in this case, we have a virtual machine, which is a Windows operating system. Not Windows, actually. It's going to be Linux, because I'm getting from Linux. So basically, this Linux VM is already defined. All the network, storage, and hard drive network, subnet, virtual network, everything is defined within this given Bicep file. But I'm referencing this existing Bicep file in order to be able to scope that into a module and then reuse this Bicep file in another provisioning by referencing that and putting the required parameters, which are all listed here. So once I put the correct parameters here, then I actually can provision this module. In this case, it's a virtual machine, and it's going to be provisioned within given scope. And in our case, this scope is the resource group that is defined, here on top. So it's a compute resource group where it's get defined. Okay. All right. So that said, is there like any questions? If there are no questions, I want to move forward with demo one, where we'll actually get started to work with Azure Bicep and see, how Azure Bicep compiles, how Azure Bicep actually used within the VS Code, Visual Studio Code. Okay, if there is any question, just type in the chat. Okay. Meanwhile, I'm going to switch the screens here and bring the Visual Studio Code. All right, guys, let me make it a little bigger so everybody can see it and put it down. So what we see here, I'm going to share this is on GitHub, so you can actually later on just fork it and use it for your pleasure, for your learning purposes. And here, first, I want to start with extension. If you remember, I told you that there's an extension called Bicep. And if you go to the extensions place, which is this icon on your Visual Studio Code, and type Bicep, you should get this Bicep extension. You just click on install and it's going to be installed. It's already pre-installed on my environment, and if you scroll down, it has many recommendations that you can use, and it will tell you that if you have a squiggly line, like red squiggly line, while you are actually creating your Bicep template, then it means that there are something wrong. And in this case, for example, it requires that name and location and SKU and other related information for storage account needs to be in place before this Google line red becomes, goes away. Okay. And there are some other things that you can look. I'm not going to describe it all, but this is very useful and handy to have in place if you are going to provision any Azure resources using the Bicep language. Okay. So I'm closing that and going back to the file. So what we have here is that first I want to start with empty file, because if you remember, we say that Azure Biceps actually transpiles everything into the Azure ARM JSON files, correct? So in order to show that, I'm going to take an empty Bicep file, which is defined here. It's empty bicep dot bicep file. It has extension bicep and it is empty, as you may see it's here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, okay, az bicep. I'm going to type the command and then I'm going to build this file, and it's in the samples directory and start with empty. So basically what I did here, I'm trying to build this new file by using this az bicep command. And what it should do, it should generate a JSON ARM template with the same name as we see here. Okay, it should generate a JSON file, which is going to be ARM representation, which will have this empty dash bicep name. Okay, and as you may see, currently on the left side, I don't have such file. All the files that I have are of the extension bicep, correct? So I'm going to press on enter here. So it will take a few seconds, and okay, it says that I forgot something. Not sure, let's see. Okay, probably I forgot something, and let's look into that. So if you get into issue like I have now, the good portion of that is that we can use we need to use the help, right? So if you want to use the help, you can always go to your terminal and type az bicep dash dash help, as you see it here. Okay, dash dash help. And if you press enter, it will, let me make it bigger. It will bring all the commands, right? There isn't too much, but it will give you the command what you need to do. And in my case, I actually forget this file, right? If I put their file, it's a required, so I need to put that in place. So let's do that. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to clean the screen and type the same thing, but this time I'm going to type this dash F, or you can type the full name, the file, and then samples empty. So again, what we are trying to do, we are trying to see what will be generated if you have empty bicep file. That's our purpose here. Press enter. Okay, it says that it's misspelled. Okay, empty bicep. Why it is misspelled? Let's look at it. CLS. Okay. Let me look at this. So yes, I probably put two dots. So I'm going just to execute this and see if it works this time. All right, it worked this time. So basically what we did here, the thing that was missed is when I was typing, I basically, didn't type forget the build part. So az bicep build file name, and then we need to give the full location of the file where we want to make the build. And what it should do, it's basically should generate the empty JSON of that empty bicep file should generate for us the JSON representation of ARM template. And that's what we see here. I just clicked on this file that get generated through the command that we just run. And what you see here is that you have we have some metadata here. We have functions, resources. We have the schema for that Azure ARM JSON, and we have the version. So this version you can iterate while you are building next version of your provisioning file. But the metadata is very important here because it will tell you what version of Azure Bicep you use for building that. And because we didn't have any files, it's empty. So that was generated by default if you have empty file. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete this file because there is no use from that file, at least for this case. Next, what we are going to do is, sorry, we are going to create a simple storage. Okay. So where is that simple storage? I'm going to click on that simple storage and put it down here. So what is this? This example of simple storage shows you that whenever you want to create a new resource using the Azure Bicep language, you need to have this resource keyword, right? That starts. Then we need to give the name. It can be simple storage, or you can put any other things that make sense. And then resource type, Azure resource type needs to be defined on the right. And let's make it bigger here. And as you may see here, the resource type that we have is actually telling us that it is a Microsoft storage resource type. It has a storage account type, and it has an API version. This API version is also very important because based on the API version that you are interacting with, you may have different features of that resource. Okay, so and as you may see, this API version that I have on the screen is latest one. It refers to the 2021, which is current year. All right, and after that declaration, as you see, it's actually creating an object, and within this object, we are defining the properties. Oops, we are defining the properties of the Okay. We are defining properties of our storage account. We are defining the name, which needs to be unique and less than 24 characters long, but needs to be at least, 3 or more. Then we define the location for our resource group. We define the kind and SKU of this storage account. And then we define the tags, right? In any resource, within Azure or any other cloud services, there's always tags to identify why you created this resource and what's the purpose. And the good values for any cloud resource that you create are the environment, what environment is created for and what project it belongs to. And you may have cost center, you may have, responsible or who owns this resource. There are many tags that you can do, but this is the way how you can actually introduce that. Okay, this is all good, but how we can actually, provision this, right? So how the provisioning creation of this resource in Azure actually happens. In order to do that, I have this ready script so that, I don't make any typos. We need first to log into our Azure, right? So to log into our Azure, I already made login. So I'm just going to run this script to make sure that I actually connected to the correct subscription. And to do that, I just run that script and says that, yeah, everything is okay. You are connected to a subscription. And in my case, it's called Cloud Marathon Pass. All right, which sounds correct to me. So I'm going to delete this. Next, what we are going to do is actually, we are going to look into how we create a resource group. And by default, let me go back here, the simple storage, right? As you may see, there is no scope defined here. If you don't define any scope on your Bicep language, it's going to pick up the resource group scope and would assume that this file is going to be provisioned using the resource group. That's need to be predefined. Okay, and what does it mean to be predefined? It means that we have to create it first. So for that purpose, I'm going to create this resource group, and I will call it Bicep Starter Demo, as you see on the screen. Let's run this. So once we run that script, what we see is that we get back the response that it's actually succeeded. Here it is. And this is the name of new resource group. So how we can actually know that it's provisioned or not? Let me see here. So basically, if I go to the resource groups Let me show you on the screen. You see what we have here is actually we have 10 resource groups, right? This is my Azure subscription. And if we click on refresh and wait a little, nothing happened, right? You see, it's not here yet. But if you use the command line, it's much faster. And I'll show you why. Here, if you go and clean this, so remember the name is Bicep Starter Demo. Okay, that's the name of resource group. I'm going to run this on my command line as a script. And now if you scroll down, you see this Bicep Starter Demo. It's already here. So you can, through the command line, you can always have faster look into your Azure digital estate and see, what resources you have. So in my case, I'm verifying that it's actually succeeds there. And just to prove the concept, I'm going to switch back to my portal, refresh once more, and this time you see it's 11. Why? Because this new resource group has been created. All right. I hope it's valuable for you. If you are developing and if you are provisioning Azure resources, it's very important to get to know how to use your command line and become very familiar with that. All right. So I'm going to click on this resource group. And as you see, if I refresh, it's empty. There's nothing there. So let's put first resource into that resource group. In our case, we want to actually go ahead and deploy into that resource group our simple storage, right? To do that, I have a command here, and let me actually show you this command. Let's make it bigger. It's actually, instead of create, I have what if statement here. What it does, it's a pre-flight check before deploying your resource. In our case, we are trying to deploy simple storage bicep that we created, that I just show you, which has very few elements in it. Okay, just a simple storage. And this command basically is going to use the newly generated resource group that we just did from our terminal and deploy the storage account there. Okay, that's what it does. So let's right click on this, run line in terminal. So what's happening now is behind the scene, because we invoke this command using the what if command. It's going to tell us, does Azure Azure Bicep will tell us that how this pre-flight validation went through. Are we okay to create that or not? And here's the response. As you see, it's in green here. Okay, this is the command that we just run on top here. This is the command we just run, and this is the responses that are came. So what responses are saying? Saying that, hey, we are going to create some resources based on that template that you defined. And what is that resource? Okay, response says that it's going to create this new storage account called Global Azure Demo STG21, and this is how it will look like. It will have tags. It will have storage v2 type. It will be provisioned in EastUS2 as a location. And I say, okay, that sounds good to me. Let me actually provision this, but this time instead of what if, I'm going to replace that and put a create command there. Okay, and press on enter. So this time I'm not running pre-flight validation. What I'm doing, I'm just taking this template and saying, okay, go ahead and provision this storage account for me. Okay, so while provisioning is going on, let it go through here actually, and we can go back to the portal here. And as you may see, I'm showing you the resource group called Bicep Starter Demo, and it actually is empty. As you may see, there's nothing there yet. Okay, okay, it's done now. You see, it's done on my CLI. And if I go back to portal, click on refresh, it's still not here because it takes some time for portal to take that information and bring to you. But the good news is you can use your CLI. Okay, you can use your command line to get faster information. And in our case, I'm going to run this command in order to go ahead and list all the storage accounts available. And as you see, when I run that, in a split second, I get information that, hey, there is a storage account called Global Azure Demo STG21, the one that I just showed you. It's created. Say it's created. So let's go back to portal and try it once more to see if the portal GUI cached up with us. And now it is there. Okay, now it is there, which means that everything is in sync. Good. Now, next step is we had this storage account, we provisioned this, but it's all was hard coded, right? We didn't have any parameters. That's not, that much useful. We need to have parameters. So next, we need to have parameters in place so that we can reuse that. And to do that, I'm going to close these windows here. So what we are going to do, we are going to look at the next example where I'm using a parameterized storage bicep. And I will walk you through the code because we have less time to go to the deep. And in this example, as you see, I'm using those recommendations regarding restricting your parameters. I'm using this max and minimum lengths for the storage account name. I'm using a load. I'm defining what type of storage account replications I want to allow, which is locally redundant storage and zone redundant storage. These are the lower SKU ones that you can use. In addition to that, there are 4 more um, replication types, including geo replication, which is much more expensive. And in addition to that, as you may see, after defining this allowed parameters, I'm also defining this default value. So if this default value is not defined, then during the provisioning, you are going to be asked to make selection. Okay. Then I'm using the resource group function to grab the location of the Azure region. Then there's unique storage name that actually get built here using the string interpolation. As you may see, it's using the storage name, and then it adds some unique string from our resource group ID. That's what it's doing. And then once this is done, as you may see, this is the same storage account. I called it again simple storage, but this time I'm getting the names and location and storage SKU from the parameters, right, as they are defined on top. So if we rerun this, what we should see that it should require us to put the storage name as a parameter because nothing defined here. And now I'm going to switch back to the script where I'm actually defining this. Okay, let's switch back to the script. And here on the script that you see where we define the parameterization, you may see that at the end of this line, let me scroll here. At the end of this line, I'm actually defining, it's the same command, but this time I'm defining a parameter. I'm saying, okay, give a name, storage name. It's going to be called parameters demo SDG05. Okay, that's the parameter name. And if it is too long, we can always, shorten that and say, let's say it's too long. And instead of that, I'm going to say, okay, it's para or just PSTG05, okay? And remember, in addition to this PSTG05, it's going to add some additional unique string at the end of it, okay? So let's have this PSTG, PT, just have it, let's PT without STG, just PT. And let's save this. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a pre-flight validation of this deployment where we are actually deploying this time a parameterized storage bicep declaration of that storage. Okay, so let's run this. Let's right click and run this in the terminal. So here it is. It's, let me see, started running, and we should get this pre-flight check here. Which will tell us, what type of resources are going to be created or updated based on the state, based on what we have currently running in our Azure subscription. As you may see, it says that, okay, there is no storage name by this name. So it's going to create that. And these are the, all the information regarding how it will be done. So if you want to actually run this, we can rerun the same command, but this time instead of what if, as you may see here, let me actually show you one more trick here. You can also say create, and instead of what if at the end of the, you may have a flag -c, which is a conditional. So it should do the same work as the what if does for you. And let me show you that. Let's check that. So if you put the -c at the end, let me repeat that again. So what I did, I removed what if and I put create instead of what if. And if I want to again conditionally check my deployment before doing the actual deployment to Azure, you can use this flag -c. Okay. And that's what it's doing now. And see, it's same. It says that, okay, everything went fine. We are going to create this resource. Do you want to continue? So this is a different response. Say, do you want to execute this deployment? And I would say, okay, go ahead and deploy that. Yes. And what this deployment should do now, it should go ahead and on a given resource group, which is same Bicep starter demo, it's going to create a new storage account with the name PT05, and then there are some numbers and letters. Okay, so that's what's doing now. As you see, it says currently it's saying running here. Okay, and while it is running, each time we actually run that on our resource group, a new deployment get generated. And let me show you what I mean by that. So this one is done here. So if I go back to the resource group, you see to the same resource group where we are doing deployment, you will see that nothing is here yet. But if you click on deployments, which is the area here, you will see that there are two deployments here happen. This is our initial deployment, and this is the second deployment. And you can click on each of them and see, what actually was the input parameters and what were the output ones. Okay, so let me switch back and click on overview. This time, when I come back, you can see that the storage account that I just that was defined in our script is actually generated, and we can see that. All right. So that said, let me actually switch the gears a little bit here and go a little bit faster. And the reason for that is because here, this was a demo one that I just demonstrated to you, how to use the Bicep extension and how to get started. Next demo was about parameterization. We didn't jump into the Bicep modules yet, but the last one is about deploying databases, security policies, a gamma, and a big bunch of different resources in order to make your Azure resource actually close to the production one. Okay, so how we can do this? So in order to do that deployment, you need to use actually something. Let me actually take this down. In order to do that, we are going to use a modular deployment, as you may see here. And this time the scope is a subscription, right? It's much bigger. We are not going to deploy that into resource group. We are going to deploy it to the subscription, and it will deploy multiple resource groups there. And we define parameters, and we define the resource group. We define a storage account, as you see on the screen. Then we define another resource group called Bicep Azure Global Compute V1. Then we define a Linux VM here, even though I need to change this name of the module, it should be VM Linux. And that's it. So we have two resource groups. Okay, we are going to have two resource groups. One of the resource group will say something like Bicep Azure Global, AZ Global Compute V1, and something at the name of the region, Azure region. And another one will tell us the uh, where is it? It's here. Bicep Azure Global Storage V1. Okay, that's another name of the resource group. We'll have a storage. So how we can deploy this deployment module deployment Bicep. So in order to deploy that, we need to use a bit different approach here. We cannot use the same. For that reason, we need to use actually this deployment file that's AZ deployment. So as you see here, I'm going to copy paste that. It's going to be available again. It's on the GitHub, so you can have access to that. So instead of what if you remember, to shorten the time, I'm going to put here, I'm going to replace what if with a create. And at the end of the file, we can put the flag called conditional flag. Okay, do you want to deploy it or not? So I'm pressing on enter here. So what's happening now is that multi-deployment Bicep template that we have here, it's going to use this new template. It's going to use the location EastUS2 and start to provision that. And this provisioning is actually happening on a subscription. That's why you don't see a group here. You see the sub, which stands for subscription. And at the end of this deployment, we should see, so here it is. So it says that preconditional pre-flight validation came back. And what it is telling us is that, hey, we are going to deploy 12, there would be 12 changes on some resource groups are going to be generated. There will be one resource that wouldn't be generated. So do you want to continue? Would say yes. So what should happen now is we should see that a storage account with the name GAZ, Global AZ, and then something will happen, will be created. It's going to be created in a resource group name. Okay, so the database is going to be created. Okay, so let me actually make sure it's correct. So it's going to be multi-deployment, all right, and it will deploy actually the defined resources there. In our case, all the resources that we are multi-deployment. So all the resources that are going to be deployed are defined here. As you may see, it has resource groups, Bicep, AZ Global Storage. Storage account resources are going to be under this resource group. Then we'll have another one where we'll have compute, which stands for virtual machines, are going to be deployed under this resource group. And then we'll have actually a database. We'll have a resource group whose name is Bicep AZ Global Databases V1, and then the name of the Azure region. And inside of this resource group, we'll have a SQL database provisioned. Okay. And finally, we'll have a custom regional policy. So what is that policy? Let me show you that. Custom locations policy. What is this? Is basically a an Azure policy, okay, defined in our Bicep language, which actually allows and denies custom locations. In my case, I say, okay, only allow East US, West US, and East US 2 locations. And these are the options. Deny it if it's, so let's see what's happened. See, here's, because one of the so it's running, still running this, okay. So, and it has values of deny or allow. And then this is the defined policy definition, as you see from the type of the resource, that says that, okay, deploy those policies for the given location metadata and allow only the locations that are defined in that file. Okay, and this is the actual policy deployment policy. First, we need to deploy policy and then assign it. That's what happens here. And you can, analyze this code. Again, it's going to be published on the GitHub under my account. All right, that said, let's look what happened. It's actually deployment succeeded. That's what I see here. And let's go back, jump to our portal. Okay, as you may see here, we have, it's 11 resources here, resource groups. Now, if I refresh, it's became 14. All right, so it's much more. And the reason is because we deployed these 3 resource groups. Let's look inside of each these resource groups and conclude our demo. So when we look at the compute one, you see that it deployed the Linux VM and all the resources that are required for this VM to run. If we click on a database, it actually deployed that SQL database that we were talking about. And storage account is actually deployed the storage account that was defined on that Bicep language. So that's it. You learned and you get a good understanding how you can actually use these templates. Okay, and let me go back to the slides where we left. Okay, so this we concluded demo where we made a number of provisionings, and what we covered, we learned about Azure Bicep, we learned why to use that, we looked how to run that, what you need to install, then you looked into language concepts, that part of the Bicep, and then we looked into a number of demos. All right, so we come to the end of our session. Thank you everyone for joining. If you Before you leave, if you have any questions, put it here. But this is my GitHub repo. You can get connected with me on the LinkedIn. All right. And if you have any questions, type in the chat. Meanwhile, I will reshare that swag. Okay, Victor and anyone else. If you were not able to claim that badge, I have actually another. I should have another one that I can, I will try to reshare here. Okay. So let me look for that. Okay, here it is. So I'll share another actually swag that you may try to redeem from. Okay, so try this one. Let me actually show another swag. I'm showing that so you can redeem from it. Slideshow from the current. So there's another swag that you can redeem from. Okay, it looks like yeah, I want me to install some crypto. So yes, it will ask you to install some app. That's true, Victor. It will ask you to install app on your iOS or Android device in order to be able to redeem this. And you can try this one, if the previous one didn't work for you. Okay, great to hear that some of you are learning Terraform, but Terraform, there are actually, if you look, you can compare Terraform with Azure Bicep, and there are many advantages and disadvantages depending what you are looking from which perspective. But generally speaking, if you are going to develop your resource and you wanna to deploy your cloud resource into Azure only, then using the Azure Bicep language is more, it's recommended to use because you have more support and more advantages over Terraform. But if you are doing it for multi-cloud environments, then probably going with Terraform would be better. Okay, good. So I hope did it uncover a lot of things for you? Okay, glad that it helped to you, Ramona. Very glad. Anyone else, Victor, any other participants wants to, share their story or, you know, what you are guys currently using, what you want to use going forward? If no questions, no questions from Victor. All right, if there's no questions from the attendees, I'm going to conclude. Thank you everyone again joining my session. I'm stopping the recording here. Thank you everyone for attending and have a great rest of the day. All right, thank you for attending.